Welcome. Welcome to yet another Cornell Keynote. I'm your host, Lutz Finger. I'm a faculty at Cornell where I teach courses on AI, data, product strategy, and I spend a lot of time helping leaders like you to think through what AI actually changes in product development, in our markets, in our strategy, and in customer behavior. My own work for years now has been focused on how digital shapes the world. I built a company called Fisheye Analytics and sold it to WPP. It was in the social media era. Then I worked for Google, LinkedIn, and others. And I recently built a company called R to the Side. It's a platform where we offer fine-tuned models for e-commerce and AI workflows. Recently sold it to XGen AI. I'm now the head of XGen AI, and I teach a couple of courses at Cornell, as well as a couple of workshops. So if you want to learn about AI and agentic workflows, we offer two workshops for you. One is about personal use of AI, like how do I get AI to read my emails, set up my agenda, and organize my travel. And the other one is more focused on enterprise AI, meaning how do I make sure that those things are scalable, safe, secure, and set up. Both courses are very hands-on. You find the links in the show notes like always. So would love to see you there. Now, today in this keynote, we want to talk a little bit about what gets built. We have seen amazing changes in the world. We have seen OpenAI becoming a consumer product, and lately they are struggling about maybe they want to become more an enterprise product. We have seen Claude becoming an enterprise product. We have seen enormous amount of fundings going both in the consumer as well as in the enterprise world. And behind that engine are venture capitalists. I'm associated with Cherry VC, where I'm a venture partner, meaning I help Cherry to decide on investment decisions. But it's a huge group, it's a huge industry that funds essentially the growth in Silicon Valley and around the world, and it funds the AI growth. So the question is, how does AI work with VCs, and what gets funded and what doesn't get funded? So that's the question of today's shows, like looking at what is fundable, where is AI going? And for that question, I brought in a dear friend. I worked with him like a while back at LinkedIn, as well as a stunning general partner and somebody who has used AI quite nicely to get to good investment decision. So I'm delighted to welcome Ben Orthlieb, co-founder and general partner at Blue Moon, an AI native seed fund. And he has looked at over 6,000 startup pitches in an automated way, and that's a cool thing. So we are going to talk all about this one, but for now, Ben, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Lutz.
Now, the way we do this, we normally start digging in a little bit into your background in terms of what you have done, where you came from, and so on and so forth. Tell me a little bit about yourself and tell me about Blue Moon.
Maybe Blue Moon is partially a reflection of some of my experiences, so I'll start with a few highlights. I'm French, as you will probably pick up from my accent. I am by training an engineer, but very quickly got into other areas, including finance and strategy. We crossed paths at LinkedIn, where I stayed for over 10 years, leading corporate development M&A. One of the premises for LinkedIn comes from my time at LinkedIn, working with
where we met, by the way, right?
Where we met and had our first conversations about data and what does it tell us about the world. Part of my curiosity and part of the initial discussions with my co-founder around Blue Moon is VCs don't tend to use any data. They don't tend to use any technology. Agriculture uses way more technology than venture. And so years back,
can we double down on this? Agriculture uses way more technology than venture capitalist.
Yeah.
Tell me.
I will maybe drill down a little bit at the early stages. At the late stage at this point is a data problem, and frankly, if you're doing this, you're losing out. Most growth stage VCs have seen hedge funds come into their turfs and had to react. Growth stage is mostly a signal and projections problem. It's basically science at this point, more or less, with brackets around sort of error bars. Early stage venture is still very much a craft in the good way of a craft, which is necessary, and we'll get back to it, I'm sure. But it's also, frankly, flying blind, mostly on gut instinct and what people have learned over the years without really even having the data sets to figure out is what I'm doing true or not true. And so, of course, VCs are sort of starting to use Claude or ChatGPT, but mostly to reproduce whatever they're doing. It's a sustaining innovation. They say, oh, I want Claude to evaluate a company like I've been evaluating them. And the question is like, are you even evaluating them right? Which no one is really asking as a question. So if we go back to LinkedIn, one of the things I had the chance of doing, given the data set, I worked with the data science team, your old team, to evaluate, are there signals in the LinkedIn data to evaluate or to predict future company success? And not surprisingly, the answer is broadly, after Series B, there are signals, there are market signals, and there are signals internal to the types of data that LinkedIn could be able to put together that are predictive. Things like the quality of where you're hiring from, if you're a startup, things like not just your hiring velocity, but actually much more like how many people do you win compared to how many people you lose to other companies. Those type of things, very predictive. In the early stages, no signals really work. The only thing that works is data around founders specifically, no company level data. And that's, of course, a place where LinkedIn itself will never go because they do not want to have a shadow profile on anyone. So they don't score your profile in any case or in anything. But it was, I think, truly revelating for us, then thinking about how that leads into Blue Moon to say, look, at the early stages, it is true, and people say that, but don't really act on that. It is true that it's all about the founders. And so we've built a system that effectively tackles two questions. One, how do you see as many of the founders as possible? Today, your top seed funds, because the market is so fragmented, only evaluate themselves that they see 25 to 30% of the top deals. Meaning, if I'm a top deal, I'm a top fund, at the end of the year, I've only seen in my CRM, which is the maximum technology to use, I've only seen in my CRM 25 to 30% of the companies that my peers that I'm fighting with for lead positions, that they ended up closing. So as a whole, the market is pretty effective and pretty well covered. But at the micro level, by each fund, they lose out on a huge amount of qualified deal flow. That's one problem. You can solve that with data partially, and that's partially what we do. And then two, ultimately, you need to get conviction about the founders. That part is very human to human. And we've built all that tech so that ultimately I can have a conversation with Lutz about his upbringing, his family, what happened in his life, that Lutz, as we all know, has wanted to be a founder and probably will do that again. And it's a little bit the sort of secret sauce for Blue Moon is we've been able to develop a very effective workflow, very high volume, very high signal with data and with AI, of course. All of this so we can have at the end of the process, a deeply personal conversation that is the last step in us making a decision.
I like this approach because when you look from a product manager lens to it, your main focus of a VC fund is obviously to bring return to your investors. From a product manager lens, we very often have we are very often faced with very interesting tools, ML tools, workflow tools here and there. And there's always this tendency from bad product managers to throw tools on it. Now, the way you described Blue Moon, you separate technology actually in two different groups, which I think is very helpful for the audience to understand. Group number one is, can I use data to find interesting profiles? Can I have a signal? As you said, the signal around the founder is the most important one. Group number two of the product is, once I have identified targets, can I use, in this case, not machine learning data, but AI workflows to make outreach and nurturing easier? These are two very different structures, topics. One uses ML, the other one uses generative AI and agents. And that's actually very neat to see how you build up this product.
Yeah. And there's an interesting feedback loop, which I'll cover back. The fact that we use so much AI broadly or technology broadly actually makes us stand out with founders, which means we win more because we are, in fact, a tech company, not a VC. So maybe to explain a little bit more, Lutz, on the sort of key phases of the process as you were mentioning them. We source potential candidates through data. For us, we invest in B2B, broadly defined, North America scene, so early stage. So we, at this point, use about 15 different pipelines, sources, to try to identify new teams, companies, people that we then qualify at that point with generative AI as being potentially seed B2B North America. Otherwise, we don't even need to spend time on them, if you will. To give you a sense of volume, you mentioned the 6,000 earlier. That was from our conversation a few weeks ago. I have the number in front of me. So far this year, we've sourced 7,600 teams that fit the seed B2B North America box, according to our system.
When you say sourced, you mean scored?
Yes, meaning we have found them, pre-screen them as being potentially in our areas, and then send them to scoring.
Got it. And then, when the audience thinks about AI, because that's the hype of the day today, is, hey, we do ChatGPT everything. This is not ChatGPT.
This is not ChatGPT.
This is AI. It's actually machine learning in its purest form.
Yeah, the scoring is 100% machine learning. The scoring is not us telling the machine what we look for in founders. It's the machine learning from founders' backgrounds. What are the types of teams and people that tend to be successful founders, so that it helps us prioritize our time? Because ultimately, 7,600 companies, that's, to give you a sense, the biggest funds, traditional funds, we'll see about 3,000 in a year. We are a third into the year, we have seen 7,600. It's completely unmanageable. My calendar cannot accommodate for that. So we need to figure out from that noise.
This is the second part. This is the calendar, like super important.
Because,
like you're jumping over, and I would like to make this explicit, because even if the audience, if you are in the audience and you are in any kind of manager or executive, you are faced with that switch between machine learning and generative AI, and it gets very much mingled up. And what you describe, Ben, is an extremely neat product case of separating those. Sometimes they're not separated.
Yes.
Sometimes
there are multiple phases.
But in this case, they are separated. First, identify using machine learning, and then do the outreach. Let's stay on the
yes. Oh, I'm still on the sourcing and screening. My point is, because we generate, thanks to data, so much deal flow, I will never be able to meet all these companies. And frankly, from pure experience, most of those meetings would be a pure waste of time. So I need to be able to spend time with the highest potential teams. It is not my taste or me saying, Claude, I like people that have a background that looks like Lutz. No, it is me saying to the machine, tell me the people are most likely to succeed. And then from that group, I effectively have a cursor for what's the minimum bar that people need to meet from a purely scoring mechanism so that it is worth, to your point, reaching out to them and getting them on my calendar. But ultimately, it is a time constraint. VCs are, in fact, constrained by time. I can only meet, in reality, 300 to 400 new companies a year.
Yes.
How do I select 300 to 400 companies from about 15 to 18,000 that I'm going to source this year?
Yes. Now, to give you an idea of how this looks in reality, after I sold my last company to XGen, so my last company was, we did fine-tuned models based on media as well as e-commerce. So essentially, how do you, if you don't want to work with ChatGPT as a general model, but because you need the right tone, you need the right embedding space, and so on and so forth, we fine-tuned the model and deployed it, a scalable solution for e-commerce and media. I sold it to a company called XGen. Shortly after that, the news got out. Now all the models picked up the signal. Oh, Lutz is a successful founder. What did happen? I got a lot of calls from VC companies saying, okay, what's next? Like, you're on my radar. What's next? And I realized that, so first I got into the machine learning system and got flagged. And secondly, then there was a workflow for outreach.
I have to say, my system scored you well before you had the exit, because we had this conversation ahead of time. Before you sold.
True. That is true.
Yeah, because a lot of VCs will use sort of one kind of criteria and assume it is predictive. I've had fascinating discussions with very seasoned, very experienced, successful VCs who tell me, especially, I mean, when we started 5 years ago, using machine learning for venture was sort of, you can't be serious. And then people would then proceed to tell me, oh, here are all the signals I have found to be true for myself that I would have liked to have tested with data over time. But my instinct is those are the right attributes for a founder. And then I point out that, look, this is exactly what machine learning does at scale, as opposed to your instinct, probably biases, picking a couple ideas and then running with them. But most people are not comfortable culturally in venture to give up that part of the decision making.
Yeah.
I'm not giving up the whole decision making, and there are very good reasons for that. But there are things that VCs internalize as being part of the craft, which I think are mostly urban legends.
Which is amazing. Let me double down on this. VC investments live sometimes on urban legends. Because you were an early investor in Google, your fund looks amazing, and now everybody thinks you're doing well.
Yep.
And you kind of have the feeling you do well because everybody tells you do well, right? Instead of having the data-driven approach, how do you match it? Now, interesting part, how many sources do you score a lot? Where do you get those sources from?
Any idea we can think of. Truly. So, because we've removed the constraint of having an army of associates do the screening. And so the marginal cost of finding more people is actually not that much, and it has a whole set of benefits for ourselves for the rest of the process. So the big buckets, if you want to think about it this way, is, of course, all the accelerators. Candidly, I put a higher bar on most accelerators to screen because the preparedness of those companies is not where it should be compared to pricing usually. But last week was Speedrun, which I really like. I already had invested in a company in the batch. I invested in a company in the last batch. So when the data is public or semi-public, we capture it, we score all of them. So before demo day, I'd already reached out and had started having meetings with all the companies. Same thing for YC. YC is a little more hit or miss for me. Anyways, all of this is one bucket. It's easy data to capture. There's of course all the public, semi-public sources of information. Crunchbase, not purely just Crunchbase. Crunchbase has some interesting sort of trending metrics, obscure in the back end, that we get to analyze. So we see which companies are getting more visits than usual. This is how we sourced Mercor, the biggest company in our portfolio, for example. Mercor was back in the summer of 2023, before they were Mercor, trending on Crunchbase. This is how we found them. And then, as part of our process, send them to machine learning for scoring. We used extensively extended networks, but not in your traditional VC way of like, oh, my network will source me information. We found ways to figure out every founder that Lutz is connected to. So if somebody becomes a founder, or if you connect to somebody newly a founder, we're able to capture that information, et cetera, et cetera. We also have a list of about 41,000 people that we proactively track. And this is a little bit more the mechanism that you explained, like VCs will reach out to you. I don't need to reach out to you now. You're not doing a company, but you're in that database. A lot of people are there because they've been previously funded by good funds, senior product people, senior software engineers at all the scale-ups, unicorns, all those people that are more tendency to become a founder, basically, all the people in the AI labs. And we track those people on an ongoing basis to see if something tells us that they're starting a company. So I'm not reaching out to you. I'm at sea, not sort of first check thing. So I don't need to know before you're starting a company. I need to know in sort of between 6 and 18 months period of you starting a company. And so we track all these various signals. What's interesting is, of course, some people will come from multiple sources, but this way, with that redundancy, we also make sure we capture you as early as possible. And frankly, this was a weakness of ours. When the first couple of years of operations, we do an ongoing anti-portfolio analysis. And one of the biggest realization early on is we were missing good deals because we weren't seeing them enough or early enough. And that goes to this point of coverage. Ultimately, you need to see everyone. And so we've gone from roughly 2,000, 3,000, like everyone else, a year when we started, to 15 to 18 probably this year.
There are two points. One is a public service announcement, which I should have done way earlier, but I got so excited about all the discussion here. For everybody listening to this live, I know we have a big crowd here at the moment. Like usual, you are welcome to type in questions below and ask them. I will see them here on my screen, and if useful, I will bring them into the conversation. So go ahead. If you say your name, I will state your name, obviously. If you don't say your name, I won't. Very simple. So write those questions to the team. We're waiting for them in the background. Second thing, if you're a student of mine, like many of you came to me with the question, in the world of AI where everything is organized, what should be my job be? Where should I go? And I always recommend you to do something very similar to what Ben is doing. Use data to score companies, right? And so if you are listening, I would challenge you. We need a kind of open source repository in order to score what are good companies to work on. You could, in the public space, you obviously have this. It's called Wall Street, but in the startup space, it's actually a big miss. Ben is doing this because he wants to find good investments. You, if you're not an investor, but somebody who's looking for a job, you want to do this because you investing your essentially your own resources on it. Now, let's skip. So this is the machine learning part of it. Let's now go to the AI agent part of it. what is this AI agency thing doing, and how does it fit into your world?
The next phase is to talk to companies and to understand what they're doing, and then ultimately talk about the people, understand what they're about. At that point, it's human decision, but the best way I can think of this is I need all possible information to make sure I'm trying to take the best decision possible. And so instead of flying blind, we have built what you can sort of equate to sort of an associate researcher. So throughout the process, we have Blue, our associate, that constantly updates its analysis of the company. It doesn't give a recommendation, but it learns first outside in, and then through conversations in details what the company is doing, and it gives us very detailed notes. Give you more depth into that. Blue is a RAG, highly optimized, which a RAG is effectively the idea of you use a language model, but instead of being general purpose like ChatGPT or Claude, you give it a very specific repository of knowledge that it should draw from to make its analysis or its its analysis or its conclusions here. The selection of sources becomes quite important because for us, we are in a fairly niche view of the world, right? Early stage venture is not the traditional GPT learning set. We scrape about 150 different sources of information, all the top VC blogs, market analysis, founder and VC interviews, podcast, YouTube. Those typically are not in Claude or ChatGPT, for example. We figured out how to ingest a whole bunch of Substacks. All the writings from a bunch of AI labs also get in there. And so think of Blue as, through various techniques, very good recall of about 1 million worth of pages today of information specific as to what we do. It doesn't have B2C, sorry, or consumer stuff, just B2B at this point. Some other VCs want to work with us and want to expand the analysis we can do, but think about it as it is an associate that has 1 million pages worth recall about specifically what we do. I mean, I know how it works. The analysis that it does are mind-blowing. At this point, it's pretty incredible. So first outside in, it will give me a review of the company, key strengths and weaknesses, potential questions to ask the CEO when I reach out and during the conversation. We also have built a full-on taxonomy, so it analyzes the space that a company is into, and also sort of competitors and other VC investments. This is not your usual, like, oh, they do AI with 1 million company. This is the very granular definition of what they do. To give you a sense, the taxonomy is generated every couple of weeks. We end up with 900 segments in B2B venture.
Yes.
900 segments of companies. This is extremely helpful because now there is no meeting that I don't show up prepared. And this is kind of a dirty secret, but most VCs, frankly, don't have time and don't have the resources to prepare. So I'm assuming when people reach out to you, Lutz, the first conversation, they know they're reaching out because you sold a company. They probably have no idea what you've been up to. They barely read the sort of LinkedIn on the fly as you start the call.
Yeah.
I would send you a full analysis of your company, your space, and your competitors before I even show up into a meeting. That changes the game from like you're a VC to you're a tech company.
Now here comes the dirty secret about RAG. RAG, retrieval augmented generation. Ben, you described it well. It's a data set, and based on that data set, ChatGPT, Gemini, and all the other LLMs, they grab pieces from that data and structure it then together into whatever output it is. The problem with RAG is the following. And how big are the pieces, right? So RAG has a technical structural definition. And then the next thing is, how do you put this together? There is a whole discussion about how stateful, like how much memory you need to put in. I have seen, and you probably did too, Ben, right? As soon as we had LLMs come about, there were so many companies saying, oh, I do Porter's Five Forces for you. I do your strategy department. Oh, I'm going to replace McKinsey. This is far from it because McKinsey cannot be so easily replaced by an LLM. What comes down to is, which information do you use for a given strategy? How do you cut this information? And how do you stitch it back together? And that's a process question, a process which you, Ben, have solved for yourself.
Yes.
And many people have not solved it. They kind of think, oh, this is going to be awesome. No, it won't. The question to you, Ben, is how did you solve this IP question? How did you come to the blue moon way of asking questions?
Said it well. What we are building is a process from the beginning, and it has evolved. And as we went, we've refined the process, but we have augmented the process with AI, not said, oh, this is a cool tool. Let me spend time on it with no particular goal. We are very clear on effectively measuring every step of the process and drop-offs, efficacy. So we are actually able to tell you what part of our process contributes to the ultimate outcomes with pretty good certainty or pretty good accuracy, which again, if you think venture is a craft, you have no idea because you don't track any of this. And this is why I say Blue is an associate researcher. Actually, and Blue will never even make recommendations.
I want to challenge on this. If you say venture is a craft, you have no idea. I actually believe venture is a craft, right? Because when I say the way you score is a craft, so I would say venture is a craft, and you can automate this craft now. But if you don't track, which many VCs don't do because every partner is doing their own thing, they kind of think they have.
So yeah, that's what I meant.
If you don't measure, you will not manage.
That's what I meant. People have not standardized how they do things. And even frankly, GPs sometimes will take a decision one way or the other, which is very human. But I usually say one of the main problems for VCs trying to do AI now, if they have legacy, is they have 4 partners and they probably have 6 or 7 ways of doing things. And so then to go normalize that and then finally augment that is incredibly hard, which is where a lot of VC firms are failing at that quest right now. Obviously they're trying things with new tools, but the 2 challenges we're seeing is the GPs are not the product managers, let alone the design, the tech people putting this thing together, which implies a whole lot of limitations because GPs don't know what they could be asking or not. And B, you're the poor software engineers trying to please 4 different GPs who don't really do the same things the same way. Almost impossible tasks. Versus for us, we have the blessing of it's the 2 of us. We started from the get-go with we're going to build a process augmented with tech. Before generative AI was even a thing, right? We started in 2021. But it was always very clear that we were building for automation and clarity of process.
Yes, and I think there are, if I said you build up the product well, the 2 modes that you build up. Mode number 1 is how do you score a potential venture? And that is a data question. The output is clear, right? Like got funded, did not get funded. But data access becomes one of your modes, which data to use. And the second mode is how do you reach out and nurture in the most time effective way. We know that the big venture capital firms, they have call centers to call people like me and say like, hey, how are you doing? I saw you sold. What's up next? That's expensive, and that's a spray and pray approach, and you have a targeted approach and a targeted workflow. The targeted workflow is not so easy to replicate because you understand actually what you built.
Yeah. No, it's a very good point. We are mostly outbound, right? Because the same thing, we farm signals to then figure out who we want to talk to. This is where being a tech company actually helps, not just in the execution, but in the perception.
Yeah.
Because I mentioned Blue does this analysis outside in. I don't know you, Lutz. I will send you an email that says, hey, Lutz, I found you with an AI, and here's my analysis about your company. You don't know me. I'm not your traditional associate saying, hey, I saw you started something new. Do you want to have a coffee? That conversion from I find you purely on cold email to I'm talking to is 40%.
Have you tried, this is fascinating, have you tried the impact of transparency? Is the conversion
Yes.
higher or lower if you say,
Way
I
higher.
found you, or I found you with an AI?
Way higher. When at first we kind of were shy around the whole we score you with an AI, etc. That conversion, I use other things, mostly sort of request for intro as part of my waterfall. But originally, we were reaching out cold without the mentions of the tech, without the proof of the tech. By mentioning tech and then proving tech by giving you the analysis about your company, we went from effectively 5 to 10% conversion to a 40% conversion. And then on top of that,
I have seen this more often. Like there's a huge discussion at the moment in the industry about how to announce AI. And I think at the moment, transparency is the best way. If you go and you say your CX bot is a bot, people actually understand that they can cut through the crap. This is what I need. Give it to me now. And it becomes way more effective. If it's a real bot, if it's just a typical like workflow bot, then this is terrible.
The title of the cold email is You've been found by Agatha, the AI of a seed venture fund.
Oh, nice. I want to get this email. I want to be found by Agatha. All right, very cool. Then let's shift gears a little bit. What's investable in this world today? Isn't like you know the general question is everything will be taken on by OpenAI and Anthropic. Why should I even start a startup now?
There are many different ways I can go with that. I think maybe the first thing is, yes, things are changing, right? People are talking about SaaS apocalypse, probably overblown because you still don't want just to rely on like Bob in IT to give you your systems and be SOC 2 compliance, etc. But I think the main question or the main point there is what used to be somewhat hard isn't hard anymore, right? Your pure like workflow systems. I mean, hell, we've built our entire workflow into our own systems ourselves. We don't even have external devs, etc. But there are still hard problems to solve. And so I think the classic startup of like I'm a new SaaS with a view on like replacing your finance process, that's going to be tough. There still is incumbents that I think will do well. What I'm seeing more and more is people are going after harder problems because harder problems require deeper product insight and market knowledge. And so I think ironically in the world of AI, clearer positioning, clearer choices actually are worth it. Because if you were building a SaaS company, part of the value, frankly, was you were saying as a PM, I think this process covers 80% of your need, dear customers, and that's sort of common denominator that's going to work for everyone. And frankly, you don't have a better choice, so you're going to standardize on this. This is your workday.
I think that's actually
Now,
like very fair said, right? Because all this bashing on SaaS was based on this average workflow.
yes.
And people say, well, we can do now any workflow, so SaaS is dead. But that's not true, because SaaS still has the database, the privacy, all the enterprise scalability,
Customer support.
customer support, right? Maybe in AI, but the right AI. Now, on top of this, you can now plug any workflow, but that means you have to understand the industry. As much as I would be very bad to create an outreach workflow for a venture capital firm, right? Because what do I know about outreach? Never done this outreach for capital, like to nurture. You understand how to do this outreach and you build a workflow for it. And you iterate it around this workflow to figure out what are all the exceptional cases, how do you improve this workflow so that you get the highest success.
I didn't even think about this, but the proof of what you just said is we've been building for ourselves for 5 years doing this. We now have other VCs asking to buy pieces of our system.
Yes.
Because in many ways, we have iterated so much with this view of like use AI in a VC workflow with a point of view. And so they're not going to use exactly our workflow, but a lot of the bricks they want to buy from us.
Yes, but now in interesting discussion, very often people have said, we have no AI. Why don't I have my Agatha, like you call it Agatha for finding companies? Why don't I have my AI to do my emails, to do my calendar, and so on and so forth? There are companies out there who offer this, but they are extremely bad because they try to force you into an existing workflow structure. While what you really want is you want the workflow that you came up with. The easiest example is tagging from email. What are the tags you want for your email? Depends probably on you, the moment in your life, and what you are doing, right?
Yeah.
I have as tags customers, universities, VC funds, and so on and so forth. You probably don't, because you are not working for 2 universities, right? So that structure and how fast you reach out, how important is something that is an inherent structure for you. And therefore, companies failed so far to do this. The next big thing I will like expect to see is a whole vibe coding of AI agent. How do you get an agent to do exactly what you want, so that you, Ben, can say, well, I have my business here at the moment, I'm doing VC stuff, help me understand what the workflow is. I never wrote down, but it's working, right? It's my workflow. That is where we will need the future tools, I guess.
Interestingly enough, it's a company out of Andreessen Speedrun last week that we're looking at that's doing something similar to that. But again, they come with extreme insights on the product. It is literally the CEO's thesis at Oxford around organizing agents and knowledge in the context of a company. Because again, as you said, somebody can come up with a mediocre answer, but things now become hard, especially in the sense of like they're going to be extremely flexible and adapt to you. And you can't really, you can vibe code how, like part of the tech, you can't vibe code how it actually works. The architecture is where it's hard.
And this is so fascinating. When I ask my students to build applications, they build SaaS interfaces. It was like, guys,
Yeah.
Only because you can vibe code in a SaaS interface does not mean that a SaaS interface is the future. The future is adaptive workflows. But at the moment, even Claude Code and OpenAI and all of those tools and Gemini, they're extremely bad in understanding how to design a workflow so that it is adaptive to you. We are missing this. We are missing the Facebook or mobile moment. It's about to come. When is a good question, and whoever cracks that nut will be a winner.
I think the interesting point here is also it's probably going to be headless, meaning faceless. To your point, people put a SaaS UI because that's what they're used to dealing with. But most of this doesn't require UI anymore.
Yes.
An interesting actual market trend that I'm seeing, and we can go into trends, but basically I've done 90 conversations with first companies since the beginning of the year. One of the things that comes up a lot more is that the data is becoming the execution layer. What do I mean by that? Every large-ish company has a version of Databricks, Snowflake, and what they've built on top of it is visualization, because they need visualization to try to understand what's going on. And then they call the data team and say, oh, I'm trying to build this. I need a data pipeline and I need a workflow. Companies are coming in and they're saying, I will directly from your company data, tell you how you need to change your workflows, tell you what's going on. You don't need all of these interfaces. We go directly from the data to here's how you start working tomorrow. No interface.
Yes, fascinating. So if the data, like actually, I would like to say this slightly different. Evals might become the new workflow. If I look at, so Agent Garden from Google, okay, now you can connect your Gmail and then you get a little window open where you can put a prompt in, similar to N8N. N8N is another company that does workflows. You connect Google and then like on your whole screen, you have a small little window. Then you can type something in. Okay, now you have your Google connected, you have your prompt, you do something. Later on, you look at the evals and trying to figure out, did it work what I actually wanted to do with my workflow? And if the answer is no, it didn't, to have the lineage, to have the traceability where it went wrong is hard. There are tools to do this. But still, it's very hard to actually dig into it. So it becomes very complex. And if you go to Claude Code today and you're trying to optimize a skill, you end up discussing with Claude Code hours and hours, and you would have been faster just look at the workflow in code. And that's a problem we need to solve. Now, tell me your big outlooks. Where will we go?
Where will we go? So I think there's a trend that's, before I go into actual industry trends, one thing that builds, I think, from what we were discussing, which is deep industry or deeper than previous generation in terms of industry knowledge and tech insights, which frankly, if I look at my portfolio in the recent fund that we're starting, all these companies have very deep insights. The other trend is teams are smaller and more high powered. What I mean by this is still early days, but I'm seeing more and more companies with one CEO who maybe is more product, maybe more commercial, and call it 3 CTOs. Very legit CTOs who with 5 years ago could not be at the same company because frankly, it would be a waste because you could not get the leverage on them. And they're basically saying, we're going to run this team of 4 until probably our Series A because we don't need anyone else. You take 3 high-powered CTOs. I'm thinking of a company we just invested in, SenseMesh, founder of Mesosphere, one of the sort of foundational frameworks for scaling web, basically, web applications, an ex-CTO at Google X, and a third person, same caliber. Each one of them could be a founder, each one of them could be a CTO, but they would be limited by translating their output into actual code with large development teams. They don't need any of that. The 3 of them plus Claude Code means they can go after a very hard problem with this lean a team. And so I think a structural trend we're going to see is much smaller companies at Series A with much more, again, senior by virtue of insight and industry knowledge. Because again, the middle of tech is not hard anymore. And they get so much leverage, they can move at the speed of their mind almost, versus having 20 engineers do that for them. And then there are a whole bunch of industry trends that I'm happy to talk through.
Very cool. Now, What's at the moment, if you look backwards, the best investment you did?
In the first fund, it was Mercor.
Oh, nice. Yes.
And
Tell
it
the
is
audience a little bit about Mercor, what they do.
Mercor is not exactly what they set out to do at the beginning, by the way. Mercor is a company that effectively matches people with AI companies for the purpose of building reinforcement learning loops. So they would come to you, Lutz, and say, hey, Lutz, we have a project for Anthropic. They may not name the customer, and say, we need to validate the outputs. We need you to teach the model to be better on something you're an expert into. Every model, every builder of a model uses this to some extent, and that extent in turns out is increasing over time.
Yeah.
Again, not exactly where they started, but we were part of the seed in October 2023.
Data quality for models is a huge thing. If we
Yes.
say that the new interface is the evaluation, then somebody needs to actually ensure that the evaluation data is there and constantly reviewed. At Google, I built up, was one of the PMs in the Google Health team, right? So we had hundreds of doctors helping us with our various problems because somebody needs to look at data and saying, this is the right information I see or not.
And so, given ChatGPT moment, the company went from the seed to a $10 billion valuation in 2 years. This is the fastest growth company in history so far.
Now,
and it is a textbook application of how we work, which is
totally
crazy.
Yes. Now we see a lot of amazing companies got built and they had difficulties to establish the footprint. We heard about Cursor now being sold to Elon Musk, which is amazing because Cursor was such a money printing machine and it seemed to be on a very good trajectory. Now, I think Elon Musk has a high appetite for people who could use their Grok servers. I think Grok isn't doing that well. But what do you tell the startups you work with? How to stay resilient, how to win in this game in the long run when so many things are happening at the same time?
So ultimately, going back to our process, because you use the word resilient, that's a people person. We actually pre-screen. Like we literally, our ultimate decision is how resilient are these people, and we go deep into their personal lives to evaluate why or where it comes from. But so I don't pretend to teach them to be resilient. I try to invest in people that are by nature already extremely resilient. But to your question, I think it goes back to this point of deep insight and point of view. Because what worries people like Cursor and most middle ground solutions is your ChatGPT, will your OpenAI, will your Anthropic, because they aggregate everything, will also come with the average solution. They will not go into the, okay, I need to really take a stance, and maybe that limits my market to the 10% of health professional that really work on this thing. But will OpenAI do something generic in health and be good at it? Yeah. But at the same time, venture success is not $1 trillion company. I mean, it is the ultimate success, but you are still seeing, like in the case of Mercor, companies that can go to tens of billion with a very specific sort of angle.
Yes, got it. Now,
I think ultimately, I love your view on this. Tech has been gaining percentage of GDP over time, to today being somewhere between 15 and 20. I think with AI, this is going to explode. And so you can take the point of view of like every company is doomed, but you can also take a point of view that tech is going to permeate so much, including venture, as I said, or agriculture, that you, looking at that lens, you end up with, by definition, a whole bunch of winners.
Yes.
That are going to find large niches in those markets.
And I actually believe if you take the idea of AI being an enabler, technology being an enabler, then you take today's core value of a company and there are ability to make them better. If you're a marketplace, you have better matchmaking, right? Deezer is like the music company out of your home country, out of France. Deezer is a fascinating example. They recently announced that X% trend, like a huge percentage of their music is now AI generated, which gets launched over the platform. People consume that music, they like the music, but it's AI generated. It doesn't mean that the music industry is dead. It means the way we create music is about to change. Like talking about your guitars in the background. Why do I need somebody to play live? It's good for you. It's kind of like relaxing. But why do I need to play somebody the guitar if I can create songs on the fly that expresses the same thing?
Because I think, to your point, it's changing, and you've already seen it in music, but live is a very different and very human-based experience.
Yes, totally. That's the reason why we do this show live.
Yeah, exactly. This is why I play music live. I love the thrill. It's and the connection with people.
Yes. Ben, thank you so much. This was fun. I could go on for forever, but like we are like we should cut it to an hour. Thank you so much for everybody on the show. Thank you for listening. Remember, like the next show, we are going to talk about drones and AI and warfare. So it's gonna to be a blast. Again, hope to see you back soon on this side of the channel. Thank you, Ben.
Happy to. Thanks, Lutz.